The ghost Hisaruki is a Japanese legend of something mysterious, known only to young children. People often hear children whispering about Hisaruki, but no one seems to know who or what it is. This is the story of a person who experienced some strange events related to Hisaruki. They wrote, "I am a teacher, and recently I found a job at a nursery in Japan. Next to the school where I work is a Buddhist temple, and behind both buildings there is an old cemetery. There's a large metal fence with sharp causing harm. After a few days of work, I noticed something very strange. There were always insects and lizards hanging on the nails around the fence. I was wondering who could be doing such a thing, although it could have been the work of some mischievous children from the nursery school. It could also have been someone else. The nursery school and the Buddhist temple shared the same entrance, so people were coming and going. There were also some elementary school students playing in the cemetery, making it difficult to determine who was responsible. However, one day, a dead animal was found hanging on the fence. The school principal discovered it and promptly removed it, placing the animal's body in the trash bin. After a few days, a cat was found on the fence, and the situation was getting worse. So, the school principal decided that something had to be done. He held a meeting with the teachers and invited some Buddhist monks from the temple to attend as well. He asked them who was doing this. Then he inquired, what should I do to stop it? There was a lengthy discussion on the matter, but no one had any solutions. After nearly an hour, we couldn't figure out who was doing it, or how to prevent it from happening again. Days passed, and once again, a dead rabbit was found, hanging on the fence. It wasn't just any rabbit. It was a pet rabbit from the nursery school, kept in a cage in one of the classrooms and allowed for children to feed. However, I discovered it in the morning when I arrived at work. When I spoke to one of the Buddhist monks, he told me he had been clearing weeds in the cemetery earlier that morning. Certainly, the dead rabbit was not there when I arrived. This means the culprit had hung the rabbit on the fence before my arrival. One of the children in my class had arrived early that morning, so I took him aside and asked if he had seen anything. The child uttered only one word: Hisaruki. I repeated, Hisaruki. What is Hisaruki? I asked him repeatedly, but it seemed the young boy couldn't explain what he meant. He covered his eyes with both hands and continued to shake his head while repeatedly saying, Hisaruki, Hisaruki, Hisaruki. Later, I asked the other children about Hisaruki. All the children in the class knew the name, but none of them could explain who or what Hisaruki was. It was very frustrating. There was something that made me feel even more puzzled. The children knew that the pet rabbit had been killed, and none of them seemed upset about it. It was as if they had all accepted its death. I had the strangest feeling that perhaps they had expected it to happen. At the end of the day, the children's parents came to pick them up, and I asked the parents if they had heard of the name Hisaruki, but none of them could recall that name at all. I thought that perhaps it might be a character from a TV show or a children's book. It remained a complete mystery, and as I was preparing to leave, one of the teachers stopped me and said, I'm sure I've seen a picture with this name on it. She told me that a few years ago she saw a picture drawn by a child in her class. It was a young boy, and she was certain that the name written beneath the picture was Hisaruki. I asked her what happened to that young boy. She replied, he left. But I remember that the circumstances of his departure were extremely strange. She told me that the boy had been absent from school for a week. Then, one morning, his parents came to collect his school books. They seemed to be in a hurry, and didn't want to talk much. All they told her was that their son had been in an accident and that they were moving to another city, but they refused to delve into further details. The teacher handed them the books, and as they were leaving, she noticed that their son was sitting in the back of the car, wearing an eye patch, not just one eye patch, but just one eye patch, but two. They drove away, and we never found out what happened to the boy after that. The next morning, when I arrived at the school, the principal informed me that a chicken had been found injured on the fence. I shook my head, realizing that this wouldn't stop. Later that day, during lunch break, I noticed a boy nearby suddenly stop in his tracks, gaze at the sky, and say, "It's Hisaruki." The message was passed around the playground from child to child, saying Hisaruki, Hisaruki, Hisaruki. Then the children stopped playing, covering their eyes with their hands. Some stood, and others sat, but all of them remained motionless. It was a bright, sunny afternoon, but the eerie silence sent shivers down my spine. I sat in front of the boy closest to me and said, "I don't see anything. Who is Hisaruki?" The boy didn't respond, so I gently pulled his hands away from his eyes and insisted, "I want to know, who is Hisaruki?" The boy mumbled, while trying to cover his eyes again, "I don't know." I held onto his wrists and stopped him, asking once more, "Who is Hisaruki?" Suddenly, the boy forcefully raised the index fingers of both his hands in front of my face. Then, out of nowhere, he attempted to put them into my eyes, but luckily, I managed to move my head to the side, evading the attack before he could give me another opportunity to respond. He broke free from my grasp and started trying to force his fingers into his own eyes. I wrestled with him on the ground, making a desperate attempt to prevent him from gouging his eyes. Then I screamed, "Help me!" Another teacher came running, and together we managed to restrain the boy. We rushed him to the hospital, where doctors were able to save his eyes. After that, the animals stopped appearing on the nails of the iron fence, and none of the children mentioned Hisaruki again. Occasionally, I would see them covering their eyes when they were outside on the playground. However, I tried to ignore it, and sometimes I would still find some lizards and small insects hanging on the iron fence, but I chose to ignore that too. I never questioned any of the children about Hisaruki again. There are some things we should not know. This happened when I was only 12 years old, but at that time I didn't start to fear ghosts. On the contrary, I used to mock these stories that some people claimed about seeing ghosts, shadows, or experiencing strange phenomena with them. However, all of this changed when my family moved to a new house, old by our standards but very ancient in terms of its construction date and style. Do you think I was scared of this house? Not at all. But what happened was as follows. When we went to take a look at the house before moving in, we had a real estate agent with us. I remember he mentioned some old things left behind by the original homeowners, saying, "Just don't touch these things, and everything will be fine." I also remember mocking him for these words, which I didn't believe, and I touched those things and moved them from their place. I sarcastically asked him why they didn't take them with them, but he didn't respond. At 11:00 p.m. on the first night in our new house, I was lying in my bed, preparing to sleep in my room with the old wooden floor that made a creaking noise whenever someone walked on it. I closed my eyes to doze off when I heard the sound of my room's door opening. Then I heard footsteps getting closer and closer to my bed. At first, I thought it was my brother, as he always enjoyed teasing me. I quickly got up and turned on the lamp next to me, but, to my surprise, I didn't find anyone or anything. I was the only one in the room. I walked at the door that I had heard open and it was closed. I was about to go back to sleep when I caught sight of what appeared to be a man wearing a black hat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and convinced myself that it was just my imagination, especially since I had only glimpsed the man out of the corner of my eye, so I darkened the room again and tried to go back to sleep, but I remained awake in my bed for about 30 minutes, which felt like 30 years. After that, I heard the sound of footsteps in my room once more. I screamed in sheer terror, and my mother rushed in, but the visitor with the black hat had disappeared. After that night, I decided never to sleep in that room again. I asked my father if he had ever witnessed any strange phenomena in his life, and he told me, certainly, several times. He went on to explain that in this house, specifically in the dining room, he had seen the same man I saw in my room. He had also seen him on the balcony and in various other places in the house. At the end of his conversation about ghosts and supernatural phenomena, my father told me there's no need to fear them as long as you don't interfere in their lives. They won't interfere in yours. After hearing these words from my father, I stopped worrying about what they might do, even though I continued to see the man with the hat several times afterward. There was a man who worked night shifts, often delivering goods. One day, as he was heading to a specific location at night, he encountered a strange girl on the street, and it was pouring rain heavily. She asked him to give her a ride to her home somewhere. The man agreed, and the girl got into the vehicle with him. While they were on the way, she mentioned feeling cold, so he gave her his coat, forgetting that it had money and his phone in it. Afterward, he dropped the girl off at that location, and she entered a very dark place. Then the man continued on his way, only to remember that he had left his coat with the girl. He thought to himself that it was too late to go back now, and he didn't want to disturb her family, so he decided to return the next day. The man was puzzled, and then he noticed a picture on the wall. He screamed loudly, "This is the girl I gave a ride to." The old woman was bewildered and told him, "I'm sorry, but I live alone, and this is my granddaughter. She passed away 5 years ago." The man returned home, feeling sad about losing his phone and money. The next day, he gathered his friends at a cafe, and they engaged in conversation. He shared with them what had happened, and even told them the exact location of the house. One of his friends was greatly surprised and said, "The people who lived in that house passed away 3 years ago, and that house is haunted." Fear overcame the man, and he froze in place, unable to move or utter a word. Thank you for watching this scary story from the world of darkness. For more horror and puzzles, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like the video and leave your comments. We wish you nights full of horror and mystery.